It
Well,
is.
I think we probably ought to get going, don't you?
Can I just point out one other football point,
Go on then.
please?
Yeah, yeah.
Just for Howard's benefit. We are one game away now. One game away. One more home victory, and we're over that line.
Which line's that?
Now had 13 consecutively home wins, and our record is 14 back in 1930 something or other. The only problem with this, Paul, and I know you don't understand anything about football, but you will understand this. Our next home game is against a minnow of a team called Manchester City.
I take it you don't have a lot of chance against that team then.
Nah, no, what could possibly go wrong, Howard?
A severe case of food poisoning or something for the team might be the answer. Then you win. You're done.
I don't think food poisoning would have any effect.
Not on Erling Haaland, anyway.
No,
No.
no.
Man who kicks the ball.
Sorry,
Right.
football done.
Are we done with football then?
Never,
now.
but
For now.
for now.
For now.
For now.
For
Shall we have a little chat about stuff?
Let's do that.
What stuff should we start with, Howard?
Oh, I want to talk about. I think it's a really great idea to talk about the context of degrowth.
Ooh. Ooh.
I like degrowth but it defines what you mean about it. Because there's that thing about people think of degrowth as sackcloth and ashes. It's like, it means that we're going to be going back to the Stone Age effectively, or something akin to.
Well, there's nothing more dramatic than people over exaggerating the end the end result. Because let's be fair, we're not going to go back to the Stone Age. It's like saying, "Oh, I've cut my finger. I'm going to die of bleeding." You're not going to die of bleeding. It's so unlikely. But what's going to happen is, it's going to happen is that we are going to have to look at other ways of managing our economy and doing things in the right way. And that's going to coincide with a lot of other things happening. It's not like degrowth on its own in isolation, is it? There's lots of other factors involved in that, right? So
Before you go too far down this road, Howard,
let's give a definition of what degrowth is.
Yes.
Go on then, Gavilar.
Damn. Okay.
Well, I did look it up on Wikipedia, if that helps.
Thanks. I like to dob that Gavilar in, but please go. Let Gavilar have a stab, and then
Okay.
and let's see what the definition is.
Right. Degrowth is based on the principle that I think I've got to try and remember right. It's productivism, whatever. Anyway, the endless process of growing economic growth would require using up all natural resources over time. So degrowth is a realization that we can't go down that route, and we should therefore restrict using all natural resources to an extent. In my opinion, degrowth definitely needs a rebrand, precisely because of what you already said, Paul. Anyway, over to Paul for the real definition, Wikipedia.
Well, looking at Wikipedia, it says degrowth or post-growth economics is an academic and social movement critical of the concept of growth and use of the word gross domestic product. So basically what they're saying here is that it's all about the idea that we need to stop focusing on unlimited growth, which is basically what you said, and focusing more on something which is more sustainable expectations. And it's also about living standards and about humanity and about the environment. It's everything we've been talking about since we started this podcast, isn't it? Effectively.
So let's just have some context around degrowth, around what's actually happening, right? So currently we're extracting resources out of our planet at a rate of 1.75 planets per year. Right? So the amount of resources we're taking out per person is the equivalent to 1.75 planets. So very, very shortly, there aren't going to be enough resources on our planet regardless. So that's factor one. Factor two, we currently have an unprecedented situation in population growth, and I think we've covered this previously. But the growth rate of population is currently 0.5%. Sorry, well, not zero, is 0.5. So for every 2 people in a westernized planet, a westernized country, there's only 1 child produced. So that means over an event horizon of 25 to 40 years, 8 billion people will considerably reduce from 8 billion to around about 4.
Is that growth factor? Is that, sorry?
No, not yet. Not yet. Doesn't take into consideration key metrics that occur. Natural disasters, natural death rate, and the underlying factors of the our aging population, so the elderly and the sick. So when you so when I quote that figure, there are going to be some natural Boris Johnson's situations. Sorry, that's a reference to the COVID inquiry.
Pile them high.
Yeah. So that's one. The second thing is that whilst there is political and economic uncertainty, people don't have sex as much. Whilst there's risk, they're concerned. It's actually a phenomenon that's seen across all mammals. Actually, when there's an element of fear and risk, their ability to and their desire to reproduce is much lower. One reason why the baby boomers exist is, oh, thank God the war is over. Let's have sex. Make hay while the weather's nice. Go for it, Paul. Now your point.
I would say, does that fit with the growth rates in Africa and those countries which have a very young population?
No, because Howard was specific. He talked about Western countries.
That's what I was curious about. I mean, I appreciate Western countries, developed nations are dropping. I mean, Japan has a really old age population and almost 0 growth rate, and a few other countries are the same. I think Germany's pretty rough as well, actually, in that respect.
Germany, England, America, Russia, Australia. Okay, so where all the large Western populations are now. When you talk about Africa and South Africa, you have 2 other factors that come into consideration, which is education of females. So as women become more educated, they naturally have kids either later or less. And 2, most importantly, the fact is those countries, with the exception of 1 or 2, don't have large populations. With the exception of 1 or 2, right? And those aren't enough to change the trigger. Plus the factor that I mentioned a little bit earlier, which is natural death rates. The average to have continual population growth, I believe the number is 2.4 children.
Yes.
Right? If you're only having 0.5, that number's never going to be hit.
Okay. Can I just come back on a few things? Howard mentioned that the use of natural resources is 1 point. Did you say 1 point? Yeah.
1.75 planets.
However, that is not even across the planet. So the US is 5 planets. The UK is UK and Europe is 3.
2 or 3?
3-ish.
Yeah.
And the global South, with the exception of the westernized countries, Australia, etc. Howard, yeah, that many planets. I'm not quite sure what the scale is, but it's not 1. No.
The resources are being drained by the economic power, the money-driven economic powers, which is really interesting, right? And so that's degrowth, fall in population, and then the other factor that we've failed to even consider is artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
So one of the advantages of artificial intelligence is they can do a lot of the work that's required. Now, if they can do a lot of the work that's required, and it's an algorithm, machines that's already been created, they are less of a resource on our planet. So although degrowth is a thing, I think degrowth will happen almost naturally. We won't have to feed artificial intelligence. They don't need to go away on holiday, right? Amazon, if you look at Amazon and the Amazon warehouses, have very interesting conundrum. They had, I think it was 10,000 people employed in the UK. They then said they wanted to increase productivity. They could either increase productivity by adding in X amount of people, or they could build in machines. And they built in machines, and that met their increase, which meant they kept with the same amount of physical employees. They didn't have to give machines holidays, childcare, sick days. They didn't have to pay it. Once it's done, it's gone. And they're much more efficient, and artificial intelligence work 24 hours a day. So they're 3 times more productive, guaranteed, minimum. So when you couple those things together and you have a conversation about degrowth, is it about a decline in, as you said, Paul, in sort of living standards, or is it more of living standards dispersed across what's left of the population?
Interesting, because what's your definition of living standards? Because the introduction of AI, theoretically, is going to allow humans to have more leisure time, theoretically. So how do you measure that in terms of living standards? Do you quantify more leisure time in a positive way, or do you quantify it as you've got less money to spend?
Well, that's the point, isn't it? If you've got money, then more leisure time is wonderful. If you don't have money, then it's not. It's pointless.
Well, there's a couple of elements to that, right? So the conundrum on this is, realistically, what we do know is that whilst we live in I suppose a capitalist society, then the people who will live will most likely be people who have a larger access to money. The people who will unfortunately not get through that are the ones that don't have access to medical, can't access food, can't access energy, heating, etc., and are isolated.
That is very true, because there's a report being published this week by scientists warning Europe how the climate change is making the cost of living crisis worse, precisely by your point, Howard. The people at the lower ends of society can't afford, through cost of living, to mitigate any climate effects. There's too many climate disasters now happening around the world that's reducing the food supply. If it's reducing the food supply, food becomes more expensive. Who therefore cannot afford to buy food?
So this is where it becomes really quite interesting, quite an integrated, multifaceted problem. So once you then understand, once you then start to think, and I'm not saying that we should be thinking like this, but as an analogy, in the animal population, the animals in any pack or any herd or any tribe, the ones that are picked off and died, they're at either end of the age health spectrum.
Yeah.
And effectively, the centrists in the middle, the people who are reasonably healthy to just on the edge of healthy and the right age spectrum, they prosper. That has a similar knock-on effect when you look at it into this human model and a capitalist model. We will lose a lot of people. It's unfortunately inevitable at the extremities of society, and what will be left will be a smaller population, and realistically, in the same economic terms, wealthier population. What they won't be able to do is they won't be able to feed themselves, because the people at the extreme ends of our planet, they're the ones that do the actual work. Right?
Yeah.
They're the ones that actually grow the corn, make the food, grow the rice, look after cattle, etc. And so now what you've then got is a rich group of people who have unintentionally fall into this degrowth model, but basically want to pay whatever money it is to get the things that they need to carry on existing.
Yeah. So there are some other challenges as well.
Yeah, of course.
Which if we come back, so if we take the degrowth model as reducing production and reducing consumption is probably the key driver.
Sure.
How do we turn around to say to the global north, where the majority of the planets are being consumed? So how do you say to Americans, please consume less? They'll go, why?
Well, there's a good example here. Like, so as you know, I was away the weekend turning my son's new empty student
Yeah.
into a home for him. And so I spent much of my weekend in and out of B&Q, which is a big British box store that sells DIY materials. I was buying all sorts of materials, and there was no shortage of materials for me to use in this place. Now, I am particularly frugal with this sort of stuff. I had taken material with me. I had repurposed his desk here to take it there, and I had repurposed a lot of material. It is an effort to repurpose stuff. It's a lot harder to repurpose than it is to get a new piece off the shelf and work with it.
No, it's a lot easy. It's a lot harder, and it's easier for you to get stuff.
Yeah, it's a lot harder than it is to get a new piece. Yes, yeah. Sorry, fuddy head. But you know, it's that thing. You know, so and it's like, and everybody, I know everybody buys a property, buys a new house, and the first thing they do is rip out the kitchen and the bathroom.
Mm-hmm.
That's just what you do. You don't want to work with other people, live with other people's old stuff. So, and that sort of stuff, can we still do that in a post-growth society?
What do you do with the old stuff?
Well, to get a toilet out, most people smash it.
So it's disposed.
Ends up as landfill toilet, doesn't it?
Hmm.
But you know, an old stained toilet, no one wants an old stained toilet. There's no way to clean the thing. They can't use it again because the porcelain's gone. So it is, and these are the questions that we need to ask ourselves. It's like, you know, these are the questions, the materials that we use. You know, I am very resistant to cutting plastic because it creates particles. People do it every day.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the things we get are made of plastic. This is the stuff the post-growth, you know, the degrowth thing gets me. Is that, yes, I can get the concepts of degrowth, but it's the reality of how that works. You know, when you're a plumber looking under a sink and like, I'll get a bit of this, I get a bit of that, I get that. It's those, when you can't get the materials to do stuff, how do you do things?
You're precisely hit the nail on the head in the sense of at the moment, degrowth is conceptual, donut economics is conceptual. How it's applied is the challenge. And also to be applied, it has to be applied in the right economies. The economy you need to apply it in most is probably America because it's consuming the most. Trying to persuade someone who is used to a standard of living to not consume as much, that's a challenge. That's a behavioral change.
But okay, so that's really interesting. You talk about as you know, degrowth is as an economic principle, it's an idea, etc. But so's money, so's society, so are ethics, so are government laws. They're all stories. What we have to do, it's how we choose to believe those stories that and interpret those stories, and how much we invest in them determines whether they are real.
You're now coming on to another fascinating subject, which is who's controlling information and who's controlling how we view things.
Narrative.
Because if you look at the concept of degrowth, I can't see anyone in the current UK Parliament saying, well, that's a great idea, no matter what the party is. But maybe Caroline Lucas will probably say, I think that's right. But it's trying to persuade. Can you imagine how popular it is to say to the population, the voting republic, the voting members of the public, to say, we don't want you to consume as much? No, naturally, we're having a situation which, due to Brexit, economic crises, climate crises, we've got less fruit and veg than we used to have.
Yeah. Okay. Here's the answer to that, and not the answer, an answer to that. Okay. Right. So what you're basing your principle on is on democracy, correct?
Yes.
Right. So just a couple of points I'd like to make.
Howard wants us.
We're going to
a benign
segue.
dictatorships coming up, I think.
No. I'm just going to point out a couple of points, right? First off, our political system has a couple of very, very minor flaws in it. Okay.
Only a couple.
Only a couple, and let's just use these couple just for this example. Only these two. Okay. One, and the first one is not as important as in this context as the second one. One, our political system is not as extreme now as it was 50 years ago. You can tell that because there are rights for minorities, there are different reforms, etc., that have come into place. And whenever we vote, it doesn't matter how we look at it, the person we generally tend to vote for is the person that sits reasonably in the middle of the sway, right? So even if we voted all for Farage, he's not as extreme as Hitler or Stalin at the other end of the extremities, right? He sits a lot more cleanly. I mean, he'd like to be able to talk about some things, but generally when we vote, we sit in the middle. That's the first point. The second point, which is probably the salient point in this, the most salient point in this, is the fact that democracy only exists when the people believe that they actually have something to vote for. And you look at the level of democracy in very simple terms. What percentage of the population turn out to vote? Now, more recently, some of those figures have been higher, but I can guarantee if there's no food on the shelves, if the price of living is so ridiculously high, if the price of electricity is and energy is so high, petrol is so high, the ability to be able to look after ourselves is so much, no one will agree with it. It doesn't matter who's in power; they won't have a choice. They'll be rioting on the streets. It doesn't matter, you can be in charge of your own little column, but if no one's listening to you, which is what is possible that we're going to get to, and you've seen examples of this quite recently in our political time in the UK. I remember in 2005-6 when I was at university, there was always those riots on the streets in the UK, like kids going onto the streets, smashing down. Because there was unrest. They didn't believe that the government was doing enough for them. That went on for weeks, right? What would that be like if there was no food? If you couldn't afford to keep, looting would happen, right? Two, in Sri Lanka, they went all out, I think it was Sri Lanka or Bangladesh, but they went all out on net zero. Their president, right? And eventually, no one could afford to do anything. And all of the people from the country, they basically stormed the presidential palace, right? The president fled, complete political collapse. Now, I'm not saying that that's going to happen in every country, and certainly there'll be countries that will be on the far left, like Russia and China, where that will happen a lot slower. But in countries where there are people who just make knee-jerk reactions, like in, say, I don't know, America, when the food runs out, when the energy runs out, and when America finally is getting called out because they haven't got the fuel to, because America was energy independent. They
still are.
Yeah. But one of the reasons that they invade is to control the countries, is to control the pipelines. Now, they've had a lot more difficulty doing that in the last 20, 30 years, because the last time they did it, they basically lied about everything, and so did Tony Blair. So that's going to be a difficult thing to happen. But there'll be effectively people just talking into glass mirrors because no one's listening. It'll be like the fall of Ceausescu.
But
exactly like the fall of Ceausescu.
But it is happening on some level. I mean, we're talking this conversation when when Palestine is being hospitals are being bombed, and
And no
people
one's
are.
saying anything.
Hmm? Well,
And
they are.
politics aren't.
People are saying this is wrong, and we need a ceasefire. And all our political leaders saying no ceasefire,
Support Israel.
support Israel.
Yeah. So how long before this is exactly what I'm talking about?
And yesterday, of course, Starmer lost a lot of people. They walked off. They walked off his team, didn't they? He lost a load of front bench people. He said, "No, I'm not voting for that."
Exactly. This is what I'm saying. The democratic system will only work while people agree
Yeah,
with the politics. If
yeah.
they don't agree with what's going on in the politics, there is no democracy. Democracy literally only exists because.
So how does that? I mean, all right, I can see what you're saying, but life has got to people tend to be quite in the UK. People are not. They're not militant. We tend to react. We don't react. I mean, France do. The French lorry drivers and what have you got with the yellow jackets were out in force within weeks of the price going up.
Degrowth will happen by osmosis because effectively people go, well, I'm going to grow my own food. I'm going to form little collectives. There are tribes of people now that are forming networks. I've got a couple of apps where food is shared between people who run businesses and grow food, fruit and veg. These are things that happen now. These are degrowth models in its basic form. They're about looking at doing things with what you've got. There are people that do cook for communities, etc., in community centres. These elements of degrowth.
So that what you're saying is degrowth will come by community action more so than by political intent.
I think it's happening. Sorry, just to clarify my point. Sorry, Gav. I think degrowth will happen through community action currently, but it will happen more radically after when government really loses control. It will be quite difficult, especially when you look at what will happen if the NHS continues not to be funded, and if people can't afford fuel. And what I mean, and I've talked about this before, which I'm quite strongly view. It's an indirect cull, and the reason why it's an indirect cull, and the benefit of the indirect cull, and the reason why Boris Johnson's comment did not surprise me at all about the olds die, is because when the elderly and the invalids aren't able to live, that increases the amount of GDP. The elderly and the disabled, they don't increase GDP. GDP is the amount of money in to the country divided by the amount of working people. If the number of people that are out of work and they don't have to fund social security, social benefit, NHS, etc., collapses, that means there's more money to spread government around the rest of us.
That's a GDP per capita. Coming back to your point, the acceleration of the change you're talking about is possibly could be driven by an external factor. If you take your points and put them back into the pandemic and just look at what happened, it does support your view. Things did happen. Lots of people started growing their own food because they didn't know how long it was going to last for. Lots of people did certain things. There was a lot more sharing. There was a lot more community type stuff. Admittedly, we can't meet each other, but people were basically saying, I need to look out for Auntie Ethel, who's in the street. She's 80. Can't go to see her, but I can knock on the window to make sure she's okay. So the attitudes that Paul's alluded to of the British people not being so militant and actually we are quite caring began to come out in the pandemic. If an external factor continues, and I'm going to be probably a bit controversial. One of the things that I think will happen longer term with potential climate change, and this touches on degrowth and politics as well, is there's likely to be mass migrations because people will not be able to survive in certain areas of the world.
You mean Braverman was right?
Sorry? Well, I'm driving towards that. Braverman,
no, I agree with you.
Yeah, Braverman, I think, was preparing the land for a long-term problem that will happen.
Okay, I think Braverman. I think the law of averages of get something right by accident is 1 in 10.
Yeah. I
That's
don't
it.
agree with Bradman's policies at all, as you won't be surprised to know.
Yeah.
Um, but but you can see on X, formerly known as Twitter, that there is a great level of support for her views, which to me is quite worrying. Sorry,
There's a
Paul.
great, yeah.
I had wondered what is the agenda for getting out of the European Court of Human Rights, because
Interesting.
there are
This a
other
degrowth
things
conversation.
in that document
Is there a
that probably
degrowth
would be very
conversation?
useful to get rid of.
Is this a degrowth part of the conversation, or is this
Well,
rabbit
no,
hole?
it's not. That's the problem. It's a thing for another conversation. I think
It is.
it is.
But you are right in the sense that there's a political motivation to try and leave the very bloody document that we created in the first place.
Yes. Anyway, another time. So the degrowth aspect. It's interesting because degrowth can be a choice. We could choose to go the degrowth, and you're saying, Howard, that it's probably going to be forced upon us.
I think it's going to be a hybrid of the two. There's going to be pockets of it, and working towards change will happen by proxy. My solemn belief is that we will start to, or we already have. I think I said this time last year. I said the price of food is going to go through the roof. I remember having a conversation with a flour economist who was talking about the wild idea of a £10 loaf of bread. Yeah, which was crazy. And then we had the invasion of the Ukraine, etc., happening, etc. And we have seen massive amount of increase in the cost of living, cost of food production, etc. Unsurprisingly, globally, because the amount of natural disasters has impacted us. But there will be pockets of things that we do by proxy, and there'll be pockets of things that are forced upon us, and those will be dependent upon how well we decide to work to solve our problems. And quite simply, we're not a problem-solving society currently, are we?
No, we're not really, are we?
Yeah. You say that, and then cunningly we're having this discussion a week after the Earthshot Prize was announced, and that demonstrates there are people still out there that are willing to try and solve problems.
Of course they are. I wouldn't be in this group if I wasn't part of that piece. But we're talking about the extension of
Yes.
life on our planet rather than the ongoing existence. We're trying to extend a short period of time for a little bit longer rather than ad infinitum.
Yeah.
I want to read you something which started this conversation for me, because it came up on LinkedIn from a lady called Erica Lovering. I think she's Swedish or something, probably, because it's got all sorts of little dots over the letters. But she's talking about what she sees as degrowth, and she's what home life for her is about less job stress, more time with my family, feeling awe of the magnificence and the beauty of nature, being passionate about something and someone, less stuff and clutter in my home, a warm and welcoming home, small enough to keep us close, clean and clean quickly, dinners with friends and good fresh food, health and good health for me and my family, and feeling good in my body, having a beautiful life, a handful of beautiful things that are well made, green spaces throughout our town, playing and cool places to play with children, fostering curiosity, lifelong learning in me and the next generation. And for her, she sees those are the qualities that she sees in degrowth.
I'm not sure if that's not mixing a few things.
I'm sure it probably is.
Yeah, because
I'm wondering, what I'm thinking about here is that as a human, we actually want relatively simple stuff.
Yeah.
And what we've built in this world is a place that's very complex.
I know Howard's going to jump on this, but if you take Maslow's hierarchy of needs,
Yes.
we don't need an awful lot. Then you add the wonderful world of marketing.
Sorry, I did
And
it. I know I did
suddenly,
it. I'm guilty.
yeah, suddenly we don't just need this nice little hierarchy of needs. You need a car. You need a new
Bigger
sports.
car.
You need a new Liverpool strip, a new Barnet strip, which is obviously discounted, obviously. But but you know,
I guarantee it's not discounted. It's bloody expensive.
but the whole concept of marketing, encouraging you to consume, is marketing the
But there you have it, isn't it? I mean, football clubs rely on that strip every year as an income stream.
yes.
Whereas they
Yes.
could just have to use the same strip every year and change it every few years.
Yes. Yes, they could. In fact, I'd argue Dale Vince is probably going to get on top of that. You'll know.
And Paul, it's slightly worse than what you just described. 20, 30 years ago, when Howard and myself were just beginning to wake up to the joys of football, teams had a home kit and an away kit. That was it. Now they have 4 strips, a cup strip, a different specific strip for a different competition or whatever. It's just mad.
And as a fan, are you supposed to wear the right strip to the right game?
Yes, you are. So if you remember the Sustainable Development Goals, number 12 or 13 is responsible consumption and production. Where is responsible consumption now? And I do apologize to all my friends who are marketing people that are watching this.
I've got to be honest with you. It's not just about football strips. Where is responsible consumption in anything?
Yes, I agree. You take food and you go into any shop, buy one, get one free. Buy 3 for 2. Yeah, offers like that. And then you go to a restaurant
today only. Yeah, all that stuff.
You go to a restaurant and Domino's Pizza, half price pizzas on Tuesdays.
Why don't you upsize for an extra £1?
Yeah.
Right. But that's back to GDP again, isn't it? That's back to the problem with that. These businesses need the return that generates. They need that return to survive.
No, they don't. Most businesses are okay. If your business only literally just makes profit, it pays the bills. That's true. But when you're talking about those businesses, no, McDonald's, Currys, Vodafone, etc. They're all about how many millions, billions of pounds worth of profit you can make that quarter, right? McDonald's don't need to make 38 billion pounds. Their shareholders might need some of it, but McDonald's don't. The employees don't. The people who use the food don't. The marketing people don't. That's just pure greed and profit. The oil executives don't. That's pure greed and profit. What your business needs to do is needs to work, and people want the demand for it. If there was a factor that actually said that it wasn't based on profit, it was based on the happiness of your customers, that was the right thing, that's a different conversation, right?
So just to add another complexity to this, what things are included in GDP, Paul?
I don't know. I always assumed it was just the basic total turnover of the country, of money coming in and leaving.
A police vehicle attending an accident. Should that be in GDP?
I guess no, not really. But there's a cost to it happening, isn't there?
You paid the policeman a wage.
Yep.
It's in GDP. It's in GDP.
But not twice, surely, because you're paying him a wage regardless.
Right, but the accident has produced a wrecked car. A wrecked car goes off to be repaired. More GDP.
Goods and services produced for sales in market, and also includes some of the non-market production, such as defence, education services, and other public services provided by the government. And ironically, they're not even providing those services. It's hilarious.
All right, guys, we've chewed this for a while. How can we tie this together? How do we get people to be enthusiastic about this idea of degrowth?
I thought you were going, Howard.
Because it's the end of the day, we're going to go there anyway, but we've got to start looking at it from a perspective of how do I look at this? What does my life look like from a post-growth perspective?
You do have, in a cost of living crisis, a natural drive to reduce consumption.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Which is
often you notice it when you go to the shops, though.
But I am not saying to achieve degrowth, we need to have a cost of living crisis all the time. Just that doesn't make sense.
But a cost of living crisis and degrowth is not dissimilar to a net zero plan for a business in relation to like the general public, right? If I'm trying to reduce the cost of my operations of living, right, that is a reduction cost. A net zero plan and an operations plan in business is just the same in relation to the cost of the business operation and or the cost in economic environmental impact. So we're getting used to these terminologies. We're getting used to these terms in different these effects in different scenarios. It's just about making sure that we can transpose those into our own reality. So I think the first way you can embrace degrowth is actually just getting out in the community and helping others, doing the right thing. Because one of the things that I've noticed since I've become an environmentalist is that I've become a lot more considerate to other people, older people. Right? So like the other day, I don't like talking about this sort of stuff, but the other day I was in the supermarket and there was a little old lady in front of me and she was struggling with her shopping, and I could see she was struggling with the shopping and she was really tired. And I went and I got my stuff through the checkout, and I said to her, can I give you a hand? And at first she was a little bit apprehensive. I'm like, look, I'll just help take your stuff to the bus stop for you, which was relatively close and outside where she said she was going. So I left my stuff there and I put all the stuff there, right? And I had to get my car and I drove by and I saw her at the bus stop and I rolled down the window and I said, look, I'm going towards this direction. Would you like a hand? Would you like a lift? And it was raining, and it was just something that I did. But I know that I've done those sorts of activities numerous times, and the only reason why I've done that is because I've taken some consideration in my fellow human, much more than I did recently. So I think the first element is be a good fucking human being. Be nice to people. That's the first step to degrowth.
That's and to build on that,
that's not bad.
You help two old ladies.
Yeah, I helped
Gavin was the old lady.
And tying it back in to something you said earlier, Paul, a place to watch at the moment is Europe, because they've just passed the act of the right to repair, and everyone loves the repair shop. And you said it's often more easy just to buy something new than it is to fix something. So the whole economic model of Apple was planned obsolescence. So your phone would stop working after 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, call it what you will. And now the right to repair is, if something's not working, you've now got a right to fix it. And the company that the original equipment manufacturer has an obligation to try and provide you with the stuff so you can fix the thing. So that concept of being able to repair things should also contribute to degrowth, as well as driving old ladies in the rain.
I think those sorts of things of fix it will become economic necessities, because people won't be able to afford the new; they'll only be able to afford the repair.
Howard, Paul's got a prop.
I got a prop. This is called a strict unit. It's a unit from a kettle. If your kettle ever breaks, you need to buy one of these. They're about £5, and you can fix your kettle.
You did.
That's clever, Paul, but you didn't tell us what it did.
It's the main switch unit for the kettle. That's the bit at the bottom is where the kettle sits on, and it has the thermostat inside it. So everything that makes the kettle operate is sitting in this little unit. And so what happens is you can hear it click. If you can hear it clicking, that's the clicking when you turn the kettle on. So what happens? These things, the contacts burn out. So you just buy a new one and replace it. But they don't tell you that, and you have to know what you're trying to buy to get it. But hopefully, with right to repair, these things will be available. But it's a very easy fix. You get one and just put it in the bottom. Just take the old one out and put the new one in.
So the right to repair is almost the personification of degrowth.
Yeah.
Because it kind of challenges this consume dispose model.
Yeah.
Oh, I feel quite good about that. I feel good about that.
Good.
I think that's a nice way to end it, actually.
I think it's a lovely way to end it. So thank you so much, guys. Catch you next time.
Ciao.
Bye.